the session, Swati Shekran from IMAI. I welcome you all for the Trialogue on onboarding to communications compliance at every step. We would like to begin by thanking you all by being a part of Pusuit 2021, Combating Financial Frauds with Technology supported by Invest India and Startup India. We would like to thank our session partner, Refinitiv, Gold partner, Rakita, Netherlands Embassy and Cybersprint, and of course, bronze partner Onboarding and our knowledge partner EY. Without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce you to Mr. Netzer, Chairman, FinTech-Aviv, who will be moderating today's session. Joining us today, we have a distinguished set of leaders. Please welcome Ofer Friedman, Chief Business Development Officer, isAuthentix, Guy Levit, CEO, TeleMessage. I would request all the delegates to keep posting their questions in the chat box, and the panel will address a selected few at the end of the session. Over to you, Mr. Netzer.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for hosting us today. I'm glad to be here together with Guy Levit, the CEO of TeleMessage, and Ofer Friedman, the Chief Business Development Officer of isAuthentix. And hello, gentlemen. Thank you for joining me.
Pleasure as usual.
Before we start and before I let you introduce yourself, just quick 2 sentences about the cybersecurity ecosystem in Israel. We're going to host 2 very interesting Israeli companies. You're going to see it right away. And what's interesting to understand is that the Israeli cybersecurity industry is a well-known industry with tremendous achievements over the last few years. But what's interesting to see is that this space, the cybersecurity space in Israel, is in constant growth. So just for the example, just in 2020, it was a record high, rising almost $3 billion. These were 100 different cybersecurity companies that were raising $3 billion. And in 2021, just this first half of 2021, we saw again another record of cybersecurity companies in Israel that were raising $3.4 billion only in the first half. Now, this was done by 50 companies, 50 deals only. And what we can see is less companies, but the amounts of money are similar. We see that the companies are getting mature. We see that the amounts are getting bigger. Every raise and every round is a bigger round. So we're talking about ready-to-market products, about growth stage companies. They're D, E, F rounds, pre-IPO companies. And what's interesting to understand, these companies, the majority of the companies, are in the identity security subsegment, or in the cloud security subsegment, or in the telecommunications, AML, anti-fraud, etc. So we're mainly talking about different companies that are enabling different corporations and financial institutions in particular to work in a better way and to better serve their end clients. And today with me, as I said, I have 2 perfect examples for these kind of technologies, Ofer and Guy. Maybe we'll start with a short introduction. Guy, please go ahead.
Hey, Nir, thank you very much. Thank you to the participants joining. Good evening, I think, for most of you in India. My name is Guy Levit. I am the CEO of TeleMessage. TeleMessage deals with various messaging solutions, and recently we've been very much focused on financial requirements for capturing and archiving various types of messages, which I guess we'll talk about a little bit more in the next hour. And I'm happy to be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Guy. Thanks for joining us. Ofer, please go ahead.
Yes, I'm coming from isAuthentix. isAuthentix is the company that right now powers the identification, the onboarding, the KYC for names like Google, PayPal, Uber, Airbnb, Coinbase, Payoneer, BBVA, banks, etc. Anything that's under regulations, which is playing a big role in this. But also, we are very much interested in the war of minds of technology versus criminals, which is something that Israel as a country quite under attack, quite a long time, needs to develop special skills in.
Definitely. Thank you very much, Ofer. And, maybe I'll ask you the first question because you touched this point already. You know how the financial industry is a highly regulated industry. Different financial institutions, they need to comply with regulations and need to protect against fraud. So what's your opinion about it? The question is, if you're fully compliant with regulations, does it mean necessarily that you're fully protected against fraud? How do you see that? Maybe there's a gap to mind. How do you see the?
Okay, excellent question. And I'll answer it this way. This week, and I think we are at the end of it on our end, our solutions that specialize in, let's say, deeper, more forensic level of fraud detection have come on top hundreds of attacks on very serious companies that we are catering. I dropped a couple of names where current regulations don't even ask to detect such types of fraud. Be advised that the gap between what regulations demand and what fraudsters can do is widening. Doing fraud today is ever more simple and doesn't require special skills as it used to, which is why the clash or the war or the conflict between regulations and criminals is actually, the gap is widening. And it won't be for a long time that way because regulations will have to catch up. So one of the things I can clearly say more than ever before, meeting regulations will give you the check mark on, okay, not having a problem with the regulator, certainly not protect you against fraud adequately.
And thanks for that, Ofer. I fully understand. You're talking about different new risks that regulations are not able to chase. For example, is it a good example to say that a cryptocurrency ransom demand is a new risk that the regulation is not taking care of yet?
Well, if I have to choose out of all the verticals that we are dealing with, which one is the most attacked? Well, crypto is number one by far. By the way, they are also handling, in terms of volumes of transactions and onboardings, way more than most other names, even global ones. When crypto jumps, believe me, the world is jumping. So it is also an industry that people, or let's say fraudsters, are tempted to attack because it's kind of, in between, becoming now mainstream, but still one of those hotspots where they like to do what they are doing. The stakes are high, the win is high. So right now we actually have a special platform for monitoring it. Well, all the first ones are all cryptos.
Yeah, I get it. And of course, the immediate suspect, a very good target for hackers can be a crypto exchange or a crypto wallet, which is not secured enough. And definitely there's a lot of risks, and the reward is high if you're able to hack to these kind of systems. Thanks very much for this, Ofer. Very, very interesting point. And Guy, I want to take it to your way.
I do want to say something about the regulations. I mean, it's really important, I think.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, we have a different, well, I have to give a background on what we do, right? So we capture mobile communications, right? We capture text messages, SMS messages, mobile voice calls, WhatsApps, WeChats, Signal messaging, Telegram messaging. And the reason why we're doing this is because of regulations, right? So you asked about regulations. If you cover all the regulations, are you okay? So the answer is, of course. I mean, it's a rhetorical question. The answer, of course, is not. And everybody understands that, and I'm sure here. What's really funny, as we've been looking at this in the last few years, is that, the regulations said you need to capture, all the communications that your bankers, traders, whatever is dealing with financial, your information, you need to capture all that information and archive it and retain it so you can find it, and then you can run various rules around it. But what happens if a company says, we're meeting the regulations and we're telling our brokers you're not allowed to use WhatsApp? So, in the United States, there was a no texting policy by almost all the companies. Deutsche Bank, they had a no texting policy, but can you enforce a no texting policy if the banker or Forex guy needs to do business with somebody, and the only way that guy's going to do business with him is over WhatsApp? can you block WhatsApp? Well, yeah, you can block it on the corporate phone, but I mean, I'm going to go down and buy another phone and send out WhatsApp messages. So in the course of doing business, you need to send out WhatsApp messages, and having a policy and being a checkbox next to the regulation saying that you meet that policy doesn't mean anything, because the WhatsApp message will be sent underneath the nose, and that will be a place where people will be able to do fraud.
Thanks for this clarification, Guy. I tackle this phenomena. I fully agree with you here. We see, in my place as a financial advisor, we see in different financial institutions this exact phenomena when different employees are not allowed to use WhatsApp to talk to different clients, but they do. Eventually, they do. So you're just, if you're not giving them the right infrastructure, right system to work with, so they just bypass the rules, and that's such a shame because it's not really protected. But I fully understand that you deal with mobile communication recording, as you said. That's what you do for a living. That's what your system supply. Maybe you can tell us more about the existing compliance regulations around mobile usage. It's an interesting question to ask. Let's investigate this further. What are the regulators chasing to record mobile communication? Why is that there at all?
Okay, so there's a history behind this worldwide, and if we look at, I'm kind of an historian here. There's a MiFID I that came out in Europe, which was updated in 2018 to MiFID II. Right. In the United States, there's the FINRA regulations, and I think most of our audience here is in India. So, SEBI, always forget the name, it's the Securities and Exchange Board of India. They actually recently made it mandatory for fund managers to make all call recordings with all their clients, so they have evidence of the client placing an order. So there's a new mandate just a few months ago that they saw that was a large number of investors that complained about unauthorized trades, and this they put out this circular. SEBI put out this circular that they mandated all this call recording. Now, when they say call recording, they don't say what exactly is a call. What's a call? What's an electronic record? Is it only an email? Is it a mobile? Is it a phone call using the fixed line, which we all have historical knowledge of, large companies recording their PBX. Any call center today records their call center, right? But communications are moving to mobile, right? And we're working from home now, right? Everybody's working from home. And no, not all companies have the infrastructure in place to make it an easy way for you to call through the office and record your PBXs. So mobile phone recording has been on the rise, and it's definitely very regulated in many places. Now, the regulations are a little bit different in every country. So in FINRA in the United States, you asked about, they're more focused on text message archiving, and then mobile voice recording, because in the United States, every state has its own policy about legality of what can you record. You need to have A party consent, B party consent, both need to consent. So they just made it easy. Okay, let's leave that alone. And there are some regulations about voice recording, but the phenomenon is global. So if there's a global financial institution, they don't want to have a different broker in a different geography doing different stuff. So they're just saying, let's record everything. So everything is growing now, definitely with the work from home phenomenon and all these frauds that are happening. And Ofer is probably going to talk about it more than I can. And these are happening over electronic communications that can be recorded, can be monitored, and can be surveilled. So there's a lot of surveillance that's going around electronic communications now.
Yeah, we see that all around the globe, really, with different occasions. Ofer, it will be interesting to give it back to you and to ask you, what are the main new trends? Guy mentioned the new trends and new fraud that hackers use. So what are the new trends you detect coming from customers and regulators? To what extent it influences fintech companies and their offered products, or your offered products in Authentix?
Okay. So first of all, if you would ask me that 3 years ago, probably my answer was different. The good news is, if we start with the customers, with the consumers, yes, they are used to being asked to do what they're asked to do, to show their ID, to show their face. Not that they like it that much, neither do I, but it's something you cannot do without. So what's left is, how do they treat or address what they are being required to do? And here, the bad news is that the way the service providers, the banks, the lenders, etc., are doing it is missing something in the realm of customer experience. We hear the term customer experience more and more than ever before, but we see less understanding of what it actually is, or what does it mean, or how to do it right. I'll give you a simple example. One of the banks we are working with was experimenting with face matching, your selfie to the ID, a basic requirement. And part of it, as you know, based on regulations, there also needs to be an element of liveness. And by the way, liveness does not measure your pulse. It's simply an anti-spoofing methodology. So in order to make sure it's an actual person, not a picture, not a printout, they were asked to turn the face left, turn the face right, forward, etc., what is known as active face liveness. How was it communicated or requested from them? On the screen of the mobile phone, it said, please look right, please look left. And they made an experiment with actual customers. Okay, so turn left. Now on the screen, which is supposed to be in front of me, but I'm looking left, it said, look forward. They did not look forward because they did not see the screen. Obviously, you're looking left. So the whole thing, or let's say the bottleneck, or a major bottleneck right now in making things happening, is understanding the customers would like to be communicated otherwise than most of the vendors are doing it. I know that some are using words, some are using animation of sorts, but actually there's much more in there. And customers are actually, in the way they behave, are now teaching companies how to communicate with them right. Customer experience is underestimated, and I'm saying it because I know what the solutions on the market are. So that's the main thing. One more thing, which is obviously clear, detection is becoming kind of in the background, not active. So you rarely now see people are being asked to turn faces left and right. It is done otherwise. So the main point right now, from the point of view of trends of customers, yes, they accept they have to do it. They don't have much of a choice, but they are telling vendors or solution providers that the customer experience needs to be there. Now, I will not elaborate. That's part of what we do, obviously, and what we also advise. But this is not a solved issue right now for anyone watching and hearing this. From the point of view of regulators, yes, there are actually differences there and developments there. The regulations have become more specific. Regulators have become more aggressive, so to speak. So some of even our clients now have to answer questions they haven't answered before. We were asked now, which we were never asked before, more specific questions like how exactly it works? What did you test it on? What are your error rates? If you change your threshold, how it will change your, I mean, this becomes like a university course in statistics more than ever before. So regulators are actually asking the questions. Secondly, multi-factor. No one I know in any country would accept identifying you based on your ID document alone. There must be face, there must be liveness in many verticals, also POA, proof of address documents. And all of this adds obviously to the data checks, the AMLs, the KYCs, which, by the way, as a means of authenticating you, are pretty much not really useful. Okay? The most prevalent fraud we see is using genuine stolen personal data. And believe me, no one has to go to any darknet to obtain it. So from that point of view, I can say that regulators actually are beginning to believe in AI. Many of them actually wanted video calls and all sorts of solutions that basically mimic human interaction via human interaction on mobile. And now that AI actually proves an ability to deliver similar, if not better, and obviously consistent results, it is written that way in current regulations. Even Germany, the most risk-aversive nation on this planet, is now accepting the use of AI as a means to authenticating people's identities.
I agree, Ofer. Thanks for these notions. I mean, I think that nowadays we fully understand, fully aware of the fact that AI is not just a buzzword. It actually works. You know, people were using it, and different entrepreneurs and startups were using it just for, you know, machine learning, AI. You know, 5, 6 years ago, nobody really knew how can they apply it, how it can be applied as a practical technology. But obviously, we demonstrated in many occasions. And by the way, to what you just said about the AML process, about the user experience, right? We reshape the user interface and user experience with time. You know, it's not just mobile first approach. It's not just that. It's even more than this. It's a seamless experience. You want to enable the end user to have banking as a service, banking on the go, to have the KYC in a seamless way, to have the AML process without him knowing it, that it's done right. The liveness check should be done that easy. Take a look at your phone. Let's wrap it up. So I fully agree. The solutions, they have to have a very good performance, a very high efficiency, and an outstanding delivery, both to the regulator and to answer their demands and to comply with all the regulations, and to the end user, so he won't feel like you're actually doing something, and everything is done AI-based in the backend. Thanks for that, Ofer. And you know, Guy, I want to take it back to you. We talk a lot about KYC, AML, but you're a communication expert, and we're talking about different communication channels with the end client. And we know that there are some communication channels that are not being monitored. Let's talk about these black holes of technology. To what extent do you think that these communication channels, the ones that are not monitored, to what extent do you think that fraud is in there, and what kind of fraud types we can find there? How do you see that?
Yeah, so yeah, that's a really interesting area, right? Because the fraudsters are always going to find a way to communicate. There's no going to be, you know, any kind of secret bullet to say, oh, we're going to capture everything. You need to. I can give you so many examples of really stringent regulations, or actually companies that have internal regulations. So if you go to, you know, not any, but you know, some banks in London, the traders are not allowed to put in their personal phones on the floor. They need to put it outside. They can't take their personal phones, so they only have their corporate phones, and that should be all monitored. But is it? So even if it's under an MDM. Will I be able to do things which I'm not allowed to do? So if you followed in the last few months the different policy changes that WhatsApp had, then you probably saw that there were a lot of people, even in India, that were really mad about these policy changes that WhatsApp was trying to do. Their privacy policy changed so that they had more control over your personal information and selling it to advertisers. And there was a lot of uproar about that. They changed the policies a couple of times and they made it a little bit easier. But there were a lot of people that moved to Signal. So Signal messaging became such a huge buzzword just a few months ago. We didn't even have it high on our roadmap. And then suddenly we got these all requests from banks. Oh, we need Signal messaging now because our brokers are wanting Signal messaging. And why do they want Signal messaging? Because their customers want it. That brings me back to the user experience that Ofer was talking about earlier. You have to build a user experience that makes sense for the customers, which means that they're going to want to communicate on the messaging and communication tools that they're used to using. You're not going to teach them a new trick. You're not going to make them maybe install a new application that they use once or once, I don't know, a year with their bank for KYC. They want to use WhatsApp. They maybe want to make a video call on WhatsApp. They want to see your face on WhatsApp, and that needs to be recorded and captured. So we are one of the only companies that have today a WhatsApp call recording solution. So we can record the call, the voice call. And we know that some of the banks are using voice biometrics on our WhatsApp call recording solutions to make sure that there's various fraud detection there. And then we're adding video as well very soon. So we'll be able to record natural video calls on WhatsApp. And the end user, he doesn't need to do anything. He's just using his natural WhatsApp. And that's moving from WhatsApp to all the other channels that I mentioned earlier. We're doing that on Signal. We're doing that on Telegram. And different geographies have different messaging tools that they're using more naturally. In India, it's very WhatsApp-y. But if you move a few, well, it's not more than a few miles to the east, you'll find that in Japan, they're using something called Line Messenger. Nobody's using WhatsApp there. If you move a little bit to the north, everybody's using Telegram in Russia. So you need to make sure that you're capturing the right information for the right user in the right geography, and the user experience needs to be as natural as that can be. And that's the way you can ramp up with what the requirements are on the one hand, the other hand, make sure that the user experience is also good. And those are some of the things that are happening now.
Thanks for that, Guy. And I'm sure that the people in the audience and viewers of this session are asking themselves, okay, so we have Telegram, we have Signal. These channels should be protected. These channels should be private and encrypted. How do you guys, technology-wise, how do you guys make sure that you track the communication in there? Can I, as a user, just give you the permission to inspect and to watch my communication in there? How do you do that? So, do you have a short, non-technological answer for us on that matter?
Yeah. There's two aspects to this. Number one, there's the company aspect, and then there's the consumer aspect. So let's take an easy answer for the consumer aspect. We have an option to push a disclaimer on every communication or every kind of frequency communication to the customer that all the messages are recorded. So my customers, let's take Numora Bank, SoftBank, they push a notification to the customer that all these communications are being captured, and they can change the frequency. It could be in every message, every day, every month, or every thread. And that makes it so there's a disclaimer so that the customer knows that he's being recorded on that thread. The other place to look at it is on the banker side. So many bankers, and I'm trying not to be technical here, there's something called BYOD. There's bring your own device. There's different types of companies that have a corporate phone ownership policy, and that means that the banker or the person that's working in that financial institution knows that everything is recorded. And some have more of a BYOD, a bring your own device policy. And then they know that I'm using the same device for making calls to my wife or sending out WhatsApps to my friends and family. So how do you separate on the same device personal WhatsApp and the business WhatsApps? So there's a few solutions around that technology-wise. Without getting into the details, most of them require you having another number on the device. So we supply another number, so that really separates the personal messages from the business messages, and it makes it really simple, not only for the banker to separate it, but also for the customer, because he gets the message from a different number if he's communicating with that banker, even if he's a friend of his. So it really helps the separation between personal and business. And that brings us to a very important thing of GDPR. So everybody knows about GDPR, and it's a big, big issue, and it's very, very important. And I can't stress how much I believe that GDPR is important. Privacy is really important. But that some people think that means that they can tell their bank to delete their information, right? Oh, this is the right to forget. The right to forget doesn't really exist in the financial world under the financial regulations. So, it's contested in Europe. MiFID II versus GDPR, they clash. GDPR says I have a right to delete. MiFID II says you have to record for 7 years and keep that recording. MiFID II wins. You have to. It's pretty clear. Make it simple. There's things that GDPR wins on, but on the right to record and not to delete the information, you need to know that it will be recorded, and it needs to be very clear to the customer that his communications are recorded and for a lengthy amount of time, depending on the specific regulation, the specific geography.
So we have a very good question from the audience about marketing communications, and we'll address this question in a second. But first, Ofer, another question from the audience for you. In this new normal, when everything is being digitalized, the question is, what has changed majorly in handling compliance and maintaining due diligence in the era of digital KYC at the global level? How do you see that, Ofer?
Holes in the net. Look, if you're talking about the data bit or EDVS, electronic data verification and screening, which is the PEPs and sanctions and the identity or PII verification, there is a list of what's available in each country. In some of those countries, I don't think they know who you are. The level of coverage is not there. There certainly is no vendor, single vendor, who can offer you, even aggregators, an adequate solution for all markets. I can tell you, for instance, that for Japan, by regulations, you need to query the Yakuza list, which obviously is not called Yakuza for political correctness reasons. It's like unwanted people we are afraid of. But that list is available through so few sources that you become, and it becomes a constant process of mix and match, trying to tailor solutions to the client. All of them obviously have a certain level of updatedness. And if you really want to know who the person is, you have to take it to the next level. I can tell you also, the easiest way to do fraud is to get someone's real identity details. And you don't have to really work hard for it. It's in people's profiles. That's the easiest fraud. Okay, you must do it. Regulations said you need to do it. It will change once the states, and this is already a process that's happening, will, let's say, reassert their ownership over people's identities. The digital ID movement that's now beginning. But even then, many countries, and if I take Asia, some of them, really, I don't know who knows who you are, even if you're a citizen. So you need to go into other things or other solutions in order to do it until the state takes over. But data check is probably the worst way of actually verifying people's identities.
Thanks for that, Ofer. And Guy, I'll take it back to you with another question from the audience, which is related to this one that Ofer just answered. And the question is, how should companies aware their users about being compliant in their marketing communications? We started talking about marketing communications. So what should companies do to make sure that they're not violating any set of regulations, as Ofer just mentioned?
That's a tough one, because there's no direct answer for that. And as we know, people are mad at their vendors or banks and financial institutions by not communicating properly to them. And we've seen a number of examples of banks which have not been very clear on these aspects. And there's today, in the very social world, then the bank starts getting all these people on their Facebook pages complaining, why'd you do that? Why'd you do that? And people don't like banks, right? It's they understand that they're a necessity of life, and they like to complain. So I really think that all you financial institutions out there, you need to take this extremely seriously, understand your audience, and try to communicate the way that they want to. So different geographies have different places that they need to be clear on. And I think that you need to be really up to speed. So, I mean, TikTok. I mean, I'm not a TikTok great person on TikTok, but I assume that there are a number of, if you're trying to get to a certain generation and you want to give them a message of how you want to be, how they would need to communicate with you, and what you're doing with their information, then that's, I think, a great place to do that, right? It's a short, snappy, get it to them, video, viral, but it doesn't fit everybody, right? So unfortunately, banks have to be more and more creative to get to the different generations. My mother, she's not on WhatsApp, she's not on TikTok, she's not on emails. You got to put something else out to her. I'm not even say why. It's going to probably go through me, and I'll tell her. But no, seriously, it's a complicated issue. Banks have to do banks and all financial institutions have to do a really great job in this complicated world of communicating that information to them. And as I said, in our piece of mobile recordings, that disclaimer that we offered and mentioned to our customers needs to be really clear. Now, it's an optional feature that we have, right? Not all companies choose to do that feature. I know I have some customers that I strongly recommend it to. Guys, put in the disclaimer and tell your customers that you are recording their WhatsApp communications that you're doing with you. And some have chosen not to do that. And I'm pretty disappointed. You know, once in a while I, wake up and tell them, listen, guys, you should do that. And okay, we'll talk to marketing, and marketing is now talking to compliance, and compliance is talking now to risk, and then they're talking surveillance. What should be the text? It could take them a few months to decide what the text should be on the disclaimer. And in the meantime, there's no disclaimer. So, just we got to get our act. We just got to get our act together.
Yeah, I fully agree here. And we're talking about the traditional financial industry. We're talking about banks. We're talking about insurers, investment houses, investment companies, and credit card bureaus. But there's also the newcomers, right? There are also the challenger banks, the neobanks. There are also the crypto exchanges, as we mentioned them earlier. So we're talking about different types of organizations with different DNA. And I guess, Guy, what you just described, this disclaimer, sometimes for the traditional industry, it may be harder to communicate and to be very transparent with their end client. And for the newcomers, maybe it's easier because they're more friendly, both with their user experience, UI, approach, language. Over there, we have the feeling that they are more transparent with us as end users. But Ofer, maybe we should complete this with you, because marketing communication, as Guy just mentioned, is one of the concerns that financial institutions have to be worried about. Sharing from your experience, Ofer, what are the 3 top security concerns that companies need to address other than marketing communications? How do you see that in the day-to-day basis?
Have you seen that scene from Indiana Jones where he opens the lid and finds himself staring into a pit full of snakes?
Of course.
Okay, so that's what happened to us in 2020. We launched a new tool that's called Instinct. And that revealed to us that there's a pit full of snakes, which you may call mafia attacks. Okay? Each individual application will look great, really. It's not a fraud that people think about, the good old cut and paste and faces glued or put on something. Text changes or content changes that are in the different font or with it's perfect. And when it's perfect, the beauty of those attacks is, which we labeled mafia attacks, they become multiple. We are catching them on a single day for a single client in the hundreds. Each one of them would individually pass. There's no way to suspect them because they are being manufactured exactly like the government is issuing your ID. No cut paste. It's all digital. So now we found ourselves forced to look at the traffic and not just the individual case. And then you find out that Near now has an Israeli, Indian, Pakistani, Philippine, American, and Cuban ID, plus a driving license with a different number in a different country, etc. So suddenly it becomes not a case-by-case situation, but actually monitoring of the entire traffic. So I would say that a major security issue is mafia attacks of that sort that need different types of tools than the usual ones. Secondly, it's we're in a kind of a transitional period, okay? You know that so many governments are experimenting with the digital IDs or ID being put on your mobile, which is a good idea. It's obviously perhaps a better way to access those details. Now, you need to issue yourself a digital ID. Now, how do you do it? Probably you have to undergo some process where you're being verified so that these details will be serving. This is a wonderful opportunity for anyone who wants to open a fraudster career, because now it's the best time in the world to whitewash a fake ID, get it into the digital, and from now on, you're good until proven not innocent. And the last one, which let's say we find especially in more, let's say, less advanced markets. Okay, in Europe, in Japan, even in India, you'll find quite a lot of, let's say, good professional fakes made with software, Photoshop. But when we are handling it in, let's say, Latin America, for instance, many fraudsters cannot afford Photoshop.
Mhm.
So they would go on the street, and it's way cheaper to buy yourself a good plastic driving license, put your photo on it, your details on it, and it's actually a physical, real document that looks exactly like the government. How exactly do you detect that it's not the real thing? We have an answer, but I'll keep it for suspense for the next time.
No, I need to know. Ofer, tell us the
Now
answer.
we're curious. You should answer, Ofer.
Once the check arrives, I'll tell you.
Okay, so we leave this question open, and I hope we will have an answer from you by the end of this session. I think we're about to wrap it up in like 10 minutes. So before we wrap it up, maybe one more question to each one of you. We'll make it the same question, and this is where we're talking about the future and where we're going with it. And you both are very visionary people. I mean, you are experts in your fields, in the AML, KYC, cybersecurity segment, and you both seen a lot of technologies being conceived over the last couple of years. So, Guy, let's start with you. How do you see the future of this segment, and how do you see new innovations in the field? Where are we heading with it? Where we will be at, let's say, 5 to 10 years from today?
Well, it goes back to the fraudsters, right? Where are the fraudsters going to be? What next are they going to think of? Because they're usually a step before everybody, right? I've been always looking and seeing, I mean, about how I mean, it's crazy, right? What they're doing, and they're a step behind in front of us. Now, on the mobile communication side, then there are always going to be ways to make that step forward before that, because I don't know if you guys read about this communication setup that the FBI had, and they gave out these phones to the people that they wanted to catch, and they put the security, the messaging application on top of it. So it's what I'm trying to say, it's a cat and mouse game here, and there's no end to it, I believe, because it's going to continue to that. There's no way out of it, and it's going to continue to be somebody developing a new communication method, and then us creating a solution that can capture that communication method, and so we can archive it, search and surveillance it, and have all those methods under the right regulations, so that the bank can continue with that. It's going to be an interesting world, because the communication trends are unpredictable. We have not, I mean, if you asked me in 2000 and I don't know, 10, if what's going to be the next trends, would I know that you'd be able to do video conferencing with hundreds of people on the same line, and that might all need to be recorded and archived, then I probably wouldn't even know to tell you that be the case. So we're going to be seeing great things happening. Fraudsters are probably going to be before us experts, and we have to be doing quick jobs to make sure that we catch them.
Guy, talking about capturing communication channels. Nowadays, we're talking about digital communication channels. If we'll take, just a minute to vision how it look like in the let's say mid-range, right? In the near future, in the next 10 years, to what extent should we balance between the right to have our privacy in place and the right to be complied, or actually the regulators' right to follow our steps there? So do you think it's going to go to even to verbal communication, to in-person communication, to recordings, to surveillance in a way? How do you
tough.
see that?
Yeah, it's a tough world, and it's complicated world. On one hand, there's and this is a very personal thing as well, right? There's people that are very concerned of their privacy, and there's people that are less concerned of their privacy. There are people that will be putting on their profile on Facebook their personal information, which anybody can capture, and fraudsters will use, as Ofer mentioned earlier, that personal information that's public, and people can use that. And there's people that are very, very private. They don't even have a Facebook profile, right? So there's a number of aspects here that are all connected together. There's the personal issue of it. There's governments and their change in policies. GDPR is still new, apparently, right? And a few years ago, we didn't have all these privacy regulations. And on the other hand, you definitely have all these frauds. So there's a money issue here, and banks don't. Any financial nobody wants to lose money, right? So how do you balance that? And there's no great answer for it, and it's a balancing act, and that's the whole idea of a balancing act, balancing between the privacy that a person wants and government's mandate, and losing money and fraudulent activities that need to get into your privacy. So marketing communications of what you're doing, what you're not doing, is very, very key, as we discussed earlier. That's this balancing act is going to continue. It's going up and down. I think that more and more governments are going to put more types of GDPR policies in place to take care of our privacy. On the other hand, we're seeing things that governments are doing to make sure that the information is available to financial institutions so they can do their job and they can keep the business alive.
Thank you very much, Guy, for these very smart words here. Ofer, same question to you. Where do we see the future with what you guys are providing today, KYC, AML, etc.? How do you see that?
First of all, Nir, brace yourself to Clash of the Titans. There's going to be a big fight here, like in the Scandinavian saga stories, on the ownership of identity. On one side of the ring, governments who are supposed to own it. On the other side, all the Facebooks, the PayPals, the Googles, etc., who are actually taking action to own it themselves. It's going to be a fight. And we even foresee legal actions taken and attempts of governments to actually fight over the ownership of your identities, which is kind of funny because the world is also going in a totally different direction, which is self-governed or self-sovereign identity, which will give you the illusion that you can actually pick and choose what pieces of your identity you share with whom, which is a kind of an illusion. So it kind of reminds me of the book that Dave Birch wrote with the title Identity is the New Currency. Okay, so forget crypto, invest in identity. So we are actually in a transitional period where in those terms you can tell it's going to be a fight. You don't know what the results are, but the results will be, by the way, in line with what was said yesterday on the rooftop in Tel Aviv. It will be a question of standards. What will be the standard of what identity is, how it's used, how it's shared, and believe me, no one knows.
So it's still an open question.
No, what's nice is that we'll sit back and see the fight. It'll be kind of an MMA type of fight between two giants.
Yeah, I get it, and the Ofer, I have to agree with you, and with both of you, also with what Guy just said. It's very unclear what the future brings in these segments, as technology is developing so fast, and the fraud activity is always ahead in a way. I mean, there are these guys, cyber hackers. They're super sophisticated, probably super creative in the way they hack and new ways they think of. And what we have left with is the challenge to be smarter, faster, to develop good products that will protect our end clients and the end clients of the financial industries. So, gentlemen, first of all, I want to thank you. Thanks very much for joining me today. I want to thank I AI for hosting us. So Ofer Friedman from isAuthentix, Guy Levit from TeleMessage, thanks very much. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to hosting you next time.
We did.
Thank you very much, Nir. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you so very much for such an interesting insights and an amazing conversation which you people were having. It was really, really interesting. And of course, I would like to definitely thank you for coming here and making this possible. So yeah, we would definitely thank you for this and have a great evening and stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Stay safe. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.